Do you feel exhausted all day, even when you've had a long hours of sleep? Do you feel like you're sleepy and tired, even though you haven't really done anything during the day? Well, if you do and you have CMT, then this video is for you. Hi everyone, my name is Larissa and today we're going to talk about CMT and fatigue, one of the most debilitating symptoms of CMT that some doctors or even people with CMT might not be aware of. So what is fatigue? Fatigue is this overwhelming feeling of being tired and the lack of energy, lethargy that interfere with daily activities. Fatigue has been a center of several research papers about CMT. Pretty much everybody now agrees that fatigue is one of the major symptoms of CMT, which interferes with daily activities, which makes the life of people with CMT much more difficult. So what is this feeling? People with CMT describe fatigue as this overwhelming kind of wave of tiredness that comes sometimes, and also the feeling of not being able to rest enough to feel refreshed. So oftentimes people with CMT, even if they've had a good night's sleep, watch my video about CMT and sleep to figure out what's wrong with that statement. But even those people with CMT who manage to get a good night's sleep experience fatigue, this feeling of not being able to be refreshed, to be rested in the morning and throughout the day. There are several features of fatigue in people with CMT. First, it's the feeling of energy depletion, like you don't have enough energy to sometimes even perform kind of daily activities. Then also an overcoming nature of fatigue, like as if a wave of fatigue comes and you can't do anything with it, you just need to lie down for several hours until this wave goes away. Also, there are variations in the fatigue. So people with CMT can distinguish fatigue that is caused by physical activity and this overwhelming depression-like fatigue. So these two can persist in people with CMT and often do persist. While you can do something about the physical activity related fatigue, it's very difficult to do anything about just this kind of depression-like overwhelming feeling of fatigue. But there are ways to deal with more or less both of them, and I'm going to talk about this later in this video, so stay tuned. It's also important to highlight the abnormal nature of fatigue in people with CMT. So people without CMT, healthy people without any chronic diseases, might also experience fatigue, right? Pretty much everybody knows what tiredness means. But what people with CMT experience is abnormal, meaning that yes, everybody gets tired, but not everyone gets these waves of overwhelming kind of fatigue that people with CMT experience. Actually, it's interesting that people with many chronic diseases, whether neuromuscular or otherwise, experience fatigue just like people with CMT. So if you do have a chronic disease, you are very likely to experience fatigue. But if you don't, most likely you wouldn't experience fatigue. And I myself experience fatigue, which is CMT related, I assume. And it's indeed very difficult to do anything about it. Oftentimes it just comes, you can't do anything, you can't cook, you just want to stay in bed and do nothing. You can't even read oftentimes because you also have a brain fog. This is another symptom of CMT, and it's very much associated with fatigue. How common is fatigue among people with CMT? Well, according to research studies, 36 to 64% of people with CMT experience fatigue, but I would imagine the numbers are actually higher, and when I conducted a survey in my Instagram account, 97% of people who voted said that they do experience fatigue. So of course, maybe my survey is pretty biased, and maybe the people who experience the fatigue only voted. Those who didn't vote. So of course, it's not a research study that I conducted, but still it's good data showing that fatigue is very much prevalent among people with CMT. Among triggers of fatigue, people with CMT list things like activity, mental concentration, especially while walking, and stress. So activity leads to tiredness in people with CMT, without CMT, it's true, but maybe in people with CMT more so. And an interesting point here is mental concentration, especially while walking. So of course, because we have wastage of muscles, especially below the knees, it's more difficult for people with CMT to walk. It requires a lot of mental energy, a lot of concentration. We're constantly scanning the ground that we're walking on to make sure that we don't trip, that we don't fall. So this requires a lot of energy, and that depletes us of energy, and that leads to fatigue. So an important point here is that it's necessary for us to correct our gait. You might want to look for more comfortable shoes, for customized orthotics, for AFOs, maybe for some walking aids, maybe a cane, maybe a walker, maybe a wheelchair for some occasions. So all of these options you should consider to make your life easier, to decrease your fatigue levels, to improve your gait, and to make it just easier for you to, deal with daily activities such as walking and walking around the house, even and doing housework. Then stress is a big factor contributing to fatigue. So here the advice would be to learn how to manage stress. Of course, it's impossible to eliminate stress from our lives completely, but there are stress management techniques that you can use to calm down your nervous system, not to react too explosively or like too energy demanding to a stressful event. So these techniques exist, and maybe I will talk about them in the next video when I talk about CMT and stress. So there are many consequences of fatigue in CMT, including physical limitations such as walking, and mood. Fatigue might lead to anxiety and depression, or maybe anxiety and depression can lead to fatigue. This is like a two-way street. Isolation, social isolation, because if you do feel fatigued, then it's difficult for you to participate in social events. Actually, social interactions deplete me of energy for sure. I don't know if it's CMT related or not, or maybe it's just my personality, but interacting with a lot of people in the same day, for example, really depletes my energy, and I get much more fatigued because of that. Even more so than when I just work out, for example. By the way, working out is very important, even if you feel fatigued. We're going to talk about this later in this video. Fatigue might lead to reduced working hours. So people with CMT sometimes report that they switch to a part-time job, or they quit their job altogether because they just cannot keep on going just like they used to be. And a major reason for that is fatigue. And of course, it can lead to reduced physical activity, it can lead to daytime sleepiness, and interestingly, a recent research found that people with CMT eat way worse than people without CMT. So the nutrition, the diet of people with CMT relies much more on processed foods when compared with people without CMT, with healthy controls. And there is a strong correlation between how poor the diet is of a CMT person and how fatigued they are. So the higher the fatigue, the poorer the nutrition, the more processed foods there is in the diet of the person with CMT. So this is an important part, because of course, if you are fatigued, it's very difficult to cook, like I already mentioned. And this is actually the first thing that came to my mind. Like, if I am fatigued, I don't want to do anything, let alone cook, because cooking requires a lot of energy. Thus, it leads to poorer nutrition. Just very tempting to grab some chips or some other processed packaged foods and not to bother with cooking. But this is a kind of vicious cycle, because if you don't eat well, then your fatigue might be exacerbated by all these processed foods that cause kind of inflammation in your body. Which leads me to the next point. The actual real causes of fatigue in CMT are not really known, but two things are implicated. First, in inflammation. It is known that different types of CMT, but particularly CMT1X, is characterized by a chronic inflammation. But actually not just CMT1X, other types of CMT have been described in this context of inflammation. So what happens is that we have a high inflammation in our body, we have chronic inflammation, which kind of depletes our body of energy. This is one thing. And the second thing is that we have muscle waste and dysfunction, right? So because of that, it takes much more energy for us to move around, to walk, like I already mentioned. So this also contributes to fatigue. So these two kind of causes are important causes of fatigue in people with CMT. And you can actually do something about both of these things. So when it comes to chronic inflammation and also oxidative stress, it's important to lead a good lifestyle. So just like I already mentioned, it's important to have good nutrition. Good nutrition means a lot of plant-based foods which have antioxidants, which have like anti-inflammatory compounds. So please consume a lot of vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds. Also healthy fats are very important, which come from vegetable oils, from nuts, again, seeds, from fish. These are really important for people with CMT. And exercises, but the right amount and the right duration and the right type of exercise has been shown to lead to reduced inflammation. So cardio particularly, but light to moderate intensity cardio is important and helps with fatigue, whereas high intensity cardio doesn't. It increases inflammation. So for people with CMT, a good general recommendation is to stick to light to moderate cardio workouts for around 20 to 40 minutes. So I found for myself 20 to 30 minutes is the best duration of cardio exercises, and I like dancing, I like doing bicycle, especially interval bicycle cardio, which I've been practicing for quite a while. There was a research paper showing that interval bicycle training, specifically for people with CMT1A, improves their fitness, improves their the strength in specific muscles of their legs, and reduces fatigue and probably even pain. So this is very important. I highly recommend you to include these workouts into your routine. When it comes to strength training, this is also very important, but mostly for muscles. So when it comes to fatigue, there is no clear kind of way of how strength training influences fatigue. But again, if you go for light to moderate intensity, kind of trying to avoid really heavy weights, especially as you start working out, is important. If you do strength workouts, and multiple research kind of papers have shown that, you will get increased muscle mass, improved muscle strength, even if you have CMT, and better functioning of the muscles of your limbs and of the rest of the body. So strength training is important to improve muscle strength, which in turn can decrease fatigue, because if you have stronger muscles, you can walk faster, you can walk better. Therefore, the fatigue that is caused by all this muscle wastage can be decreased. And cardio exercises, in addition to good nutrition, reduces the inflammation. So use these two tools to reduce fatigue. When it comes to pharmaceuticals, yes, it's also an option, but nothing compares to exercises at this point or good nutrition. So these two factors are really important to look into, and I am actually a certified personal trainer as well as a certified nutrition coach. So I know both of these subjects, and because I have CMT, I'm of course interested in exercising and nutrition in the context of CMT. And I work with people with CMT on these two subjects. So if you're interested, check out my website. I have a lot of workouts there that you can try for different levels, different durations, different body parts, cardio, strength, stretching, balance, etc. Feet, hands, what have you. Coming back to pharmaceuticals, yes, you can look into some of them in conjunction with your doctor. For example, into antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs. this can help with your fatigue if your fatigue is also associated with depression and anxiety. Or another kind of drug that was tried actually in people with CMT is modafinil, and it was shown to reduce fatigue in people with CMT. But the study was rather small, and it was quite a while ago. There was no repeated study on more subjects. So again, you can talk to your doctor about that, but it will not substitute working out and good nutrition. Another thing I want to highlight is that oftentimes you might not feel like exercising at all. Like you feel you're already tired. You might fear that working out can bring on more fatigue, which is a premise that makes sense, but actually the correct exercises that work for your body specifically can do a complete opposite. So when we sit all day, the same muscles get tense and the same muscles get not tense, right? So you have weakened certain parts of your body and you have tense muscles in some parts of your body. So what you want to do is you want to strengthen the muscles that are not working when you're sitting or when you're walking, and you want to stretch those that are in constant kind of tension. And if you do that, your fatigue will be actually gone. So I've noticed this in myself and in many of my clients, that even when you feel really tired, you don't want to work out, you feel like it might worsen the situation, you actually do your workout, you work different muscles with the appropriate weights and repetitions and duration for your specific situation, and suddenly the person is re-energized, feeling much better, having more energy, less fatigue, and so on. So this has been proven on many people with CMT, and it has been shown in studies as well. Like I already mentioned, cardio specifically is a good way to reduce the fatigue in people with CMT. Work out with me, talk to me about nutrition if you'd like to, check out my website, and I hope this video was useful. Please let me know in the comments below if you experience fatigue and what kind of ways to battle the fatigue you have. Okay, subscribe to my channel and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.